Good evening.
Yes, happy Spooktober. You know this is going to come out a week before Halloween, a little bit earlier.
Yeah. And then, we don't have one on... Should we do it on Halloween? We should probably do it on Halloween.
We'll post one on the 27th.
What are you drinking, Cleet?
Tonight I am drinking, let me get the title here, Cool Little Thing IPA.
Cool Little Thing. Is that from Sierra Nevada?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, they have a couple, like they have Hazy Little Thing and something. I don't know, there's a couple of them. I really like those. But I'm drinking Above the Clouds from Red Rock. It's a double IPA. Red Rock is here in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah, I like them. They're good. I bet that's high alcohol, buddy.
It's Above the Clouds content, man. It's 8.4% ABV.
Yeah, try not to besmirch our podcast when you get drunk while you're narrating tonight.
I'll try.
Okay.
I get violent and aggressive when I get angry, so if I just start belligerently screaming.
That's why we don't have video cameras on. You just see Britton getting angrier after every sip. It's
every minor inconvenience, I just lose my shit. I'm not a happy drunk. I watched a new movie this last week. It's on Netflix and it's called It's What's Inside. I think you might enjoy it. It's not a horror film. It's kind of more of a suspenseful thriller. It's very entertaining, I will say. I don't want to say too much about it to give it away, but it's like this group of friends that gets together before one of the main characters' wedding night. And one of their friends shows up with this strange machine, and they all hook up to it. And some weird, sketchy shit happens, man.
I bet.
Sketchy shit happens. So you should check it out. I will say that there's a lot of characters that you kind of have to know who they are because it kind of gets confusing, remembering who's who. That's all I'm going to say, but it was really good. I think you should check it out.
Yeah, put the title in the chat for me for later. So I was also perusing the internet, and I somehow came across one of my favorite creepypastas, the Arkansas Sleep Experiments. I fucking love that creepypasta, and I was just thinking, I'm not going to say I'm going to do this, right? Definitely not going to do this. But, like, if you're ever not, like, if we have to, like, not be able to record and it's just me, I might just narrate that and not title it so we don't get, like, attacked online.
You just admitted to doing it, and then it's like, hey, suddenly.
Well,
I've never talked about doing this before.
I didn't know.
I had no idea.
I didn't know. I thought this was true. I thought it was true.
How does it differ from just the regular or the Russian sleep experiment?
Dude, it's so much better than the Russian sleep experiment. It's about a professor who recruits some kids for a psychological study, and they put them into this, like, historic building in Arkansas, and it's like shaped as a hexagon, I believe, and they have a machine where it cancels out like your sleep waves, and eventually like you stop sleeping, and I guess it's hard to really tell what happens, right? Because there's no real clear line of interpretation, but it seems like their dreams become a reality to a degree, and it's pretty dark, man. It gets pretty dark. I like it more than the Russian sleep experiment. I think it's better than that.
You should also link that in chat so I can read it. I'm curious about it. I had never heard of it. I just know of the Russian sleep experiment, which we did on the show, but then we got attacked online, as Cleet said. They're like, take it down. So we took it down. We took it down. Along with our other creepypastas, I think we only had like 3 or 4. Like, we were just going to use it as like we were going to filter it into our regular content, and then, the internet said, don't do that. You bunch of bitches, don't do that. So we don't do that anymore.
I still think there's a legal argument for it because, like, you're kind of transforming it to a degree. It's not, like, copyright protected because you're changing the content, right? Like, literally, there's been legal cases around that. Like, if you transform something to a degree, like, it becomes yours.
That's when you kind of label it as like a parody of it, so you're not exactly.
No, it's not parody law, but it's something else. It's transforming it into something else, so it's not the original content anymore. So it's like, let's say you were watching Saving Private Ryan, I don't know why.
Saving Ryan's Privates.
Oh, God. But, like, you do a synopsis on it on YouTube. Like, you can't get copyright strike of that, even though you're doing a synopsis. It's because it's a completely different thing. It's not the same thing.
Well, that's good to know. Well, I don't know. Maybe we can come back to it. But for tonight, at least, jumping back to true scary stories online. And we always come back and do the top-rated stories of the month. And hopefully, with it being October, we'll get some spooky shit.
Yes.
This comes from Gabagool245, and it's titled Camping Incident Last Year. So me and my best friend try to go camping once a year. We've been doing this since we were 13 years old. Never really been truly scared or had anything weird happen until last year in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We showed up during peak season the first night, and space was very limited. We were losing light, so we kept up camp. So we set up camp on a spot on the side of the mountain that was an absolute wind tunnel. Morning came, so we went into town, drank beers, and dicked around until late afternoon. By the time we got back up to the mountains to switch our camping spot, we were losing light again, but managed to find a more remote spot. We get set up with our tents, get the fire going, and start drinking again. Time goes by, and it's probably 1 a.m. when we see a flashlight aimed right at us. Then it starts walking our way. We don't really think much of it and assume it's likely a park ranger come to fuss at us about something, because who else walks up on you in a remote part of the mountains at 1 a.m.? I don't know about you, but ever since I started camping, I learned it's kind of an unspoken rule that you don't walk up on somebody camping that late at night unless it's an emergency. Anyways, the person gets close enough and we realize it's just some guy, probably early 50s, in a shirt, basketball short, and his girl, 40s, who's avoiding eye contact with us. The man immediately forces a conversation about nothing, doesn't acknowledge the time nor his girlfriend. His eyes were all darting all over the place while we were talking to him about dumb shit like what model or style of lantern we had and how cool it was. He's saying weird stuff like that, how he used to be a former law enforcement officer, completely out of context of the random conversation that he engaged us in. When all of a sudden,
I used to be a former police officer. Like, weren't you just talking about sports? Like, what's
going on? Do you like my lantern? All of a sudden, he pretends to land his flashlight on our tents and says, "Oh, that's where you guys are sleeping, huh? Cool setup." The way his eyes and flashlight are moving gives us both the feeling that he's trying to see how many of us were there and what we had on us or near us, because his eyes and flashlight kept scanning the ground around us. We were getting sized up. For what? I don't know. Once this guy sees everything around us, he kind of pauses for a minute and ends the conversation, walking off into the woods. Once his flashlight disappears, me and my friend look at each other, and without me saying anything, he looks and says, "We're packing our shit and we're getting out of here." So we did. This was the most unsettling thing that I think had ever happened to me while camping. I think this guy was going to wait until we were asleep and come back. I just don't know for what, but I do know we were 100% getting sized up. Might not seem like much, but if you've ever had a moment with another human being who's sizing you up, you know what I'm talking about.
Hey, Britton.
I think he was sizing you up, man.
You never can be too careful in the woods, especially when you meet someone that's just creepy. Sounds like he could have been on some type of substance. But anyways, Britton, I want to show you something. I want you to kind of tell me what you think it is, okay? I want to bring it up into the camera here.
The moon.
What does that look like?
It's a tarot card.
It's not.
But it's a credit card.
Yeah, it's a credit card. Look at the back.
The fuck?
Isn't that fucking cool, man?
Where's that from?
That's my new credit card. It's literally the Moon Tarot card, and that's that's all the insignia on it. That's it. There's no name.
What's it from?
There's no number. There's no expiration. I'm just gonna say that you can apply for it. But I want to just read real quick what the Moon Tarot card meaning is, and it's the meaning of the Moon Tarot card is illusion and deception, and therefore often suggests a time when something is not as it appears to be, perhaps a misunderstanding on your part, or a truth you cannot admit to yourself. So imagine being a merchant and accepting that card and knowing that tarot card, and you're just like, what the fuck is that? Because there's no name, no expiration date, nothing. Dude, it
sounds like you're into some sketchy shit, man.
Dude, it's a fucking cool card. This one's titled, "I was shocked when I found out that I hadn't dreamt it." A few days ago, I was sitting with my parents in their house. Suddenly, the topic turned to paranormal things because recently, something strange has been happening to my mother. My mother began reminding my father of the time when we were walking to my grandmother's house one evening. My father, mother, sister, and me. I was the youngest then, only 6 years old. A woman, dressed in white, holding a bowl in her hands, appeared in front of us.
You want some cookies?
We all froze in that moment. The woman, in her white dress, was floating in the air, and her legs were invisible beneath the dress. She quickly turned toward the wheat field beside us, and we could see the waves in the wheat as she moved through it. My father began to follow her while we, in my mother's arms, waited to see what would happen. Beyond the wheat field was a river. My father reached the river, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. She couldn't have crossed the river, so where did she disappear to? My father returned pale, looked at my mother, and simply told us to keep walking. While my mother was telling the story, I jumped out of my chair and said that I had always thought I had dreamt it, and that this dream had haunted me for years because I still remember it as clearly as today. My mother said that it really did happen, and from that day she no longer looked at the world the same way. My father was pale as he was that day, terrified by the mere thought of the event. So I guess the father is still scared about hearing about it. Okay, seems pretty creepy. You know, you are on a walk, you see some creature woman floating in the air, and you decide to try to follow her for some reason and couldn't find her. Creepy story, man.
I don't know if I'd really appreciate that, to be honest. Like, where'd this lady go with her mystery bowl? What was in the bowl? She just floated off. No context. Ooh. All right, this is from I'm Not the Droid You're Looking For. And it's titled, Still Creeps Me Out Every Time I Think of It. A few years ago, fall or early winter of 2019, we were staying with my husband's father. We rented and moved into a house a couple of months later, but had been staying there less than a week at the time that this happened. I slept in the living room on an air mattress with our kids, ages 10, 5, and 1. The kitchen, dining room, and living room were all open space. There was a wide counter and sink that was a bar on the living room side. Never had stools or used it like that, though. He always had a sofa pushed right up to it and had storage for dishes and whatever in the kitchen side on each end of that counter. There's roughly 4 or 5 feet of open space between it and the wall. Along the wall, directly opposite the front door, were 3 other doors. Father-in-law's bedroom, bathroom, spare room, from left to right. My husband slept on the tiny spare bed. His dad kept the door to his room closed and usually had a TV and, depending on the weather, either a space heater, window AC unit, or at least one fan going. I don't remember if my husband had the door to the room he was sleeping in open or closed that night. Man, we're getting a lot of descriptions on this. Except for that back wall, where the bedrooms and bathrooms were, the house had windows all the way around it. Large, floor-to-ceiling windows along the front and a line of large sliding windows along each side wall. It was originally built as a sort of camp getaway cabin. Apparently he disagreed and was in the process of building a front porch and replaced about half of those windows with a wall. However, at the time the porch was still being built and none of the windows had been changed or taken out yet. This particular night I was holding my 18-month-old with a child on each side of us. We had all been asleep for a while when I suddenly awoke. I'm not sure what time it was, but the house was mostly quiet and no one else was awake. I lay there, quietly, without moving around, for a little while, and I couldn't figure out why I was awake at all, much less so alert. Not long after, I decided it was just one of those things, sleep cycles, blah, 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 and was about to try to go back to sleep. Someone knocked on the front door. Not a loud, banging, beating knock, but definitely a knock. The air mattress was in the middle of the living room, and the door was on the kitchen side of that dividing counter. I really didn't want to answer the door for multiple reasons. It was in the middle of 3 sleeping children, it was late and it was cold and we were cozy. It wasn't my house. No one else seemed to notice someone was knocking. The knocking went on for longer than I would have knocked on someone's door in the middle of the night, and did get more persistent. Though never did turn into banging, no one called out for somebody to answer the door, and no one's cell phone rang. Finally, I heard someone walking down the unfinished porch. They had stacked some boards and tools and stuff against the front of the house. I heard no clatters or thumps or anything like that, but it did sound like whoever was out there was having to walk on and around those building materials. And then I heard a distinct and firm tapping on the window closest to the kids and me. There was a small, older TV and a small stereo and speakers sitting on 2 small tables, about nightstand size. Actually, the one holding the TV was an old nightstand I had given him years before, between the air mattress and the windows. I was facing away from the window, but the tapping was right there where our heads were. The entire wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, and the tapping was done only in the area that would have been in my direct line of sight if I hadn't been facing the other direction. I don't think I took a single breath until it stopped, and I heard footsteps walking away, and they walked across the tin, all the way to the end of the porch where the driveway was. Walking across sheets of tin makes a pretty distinct sound. I know exactly what it sounds like when someone walks on it. What I didn't realize until the next morning was the only sheets of tin out there were already in place because they had finished putting it up as a roof over the porch before stopping for the evening, which meant that there were no sheets of tin stored against the wall or under the windows with those boards and tools and whatever else was out there. The only way for someone or something to have walked across the sheets of tin, which I'm certain, would have been for them to jump or swing up onto the top of the house porch, form an incomplete porch floor, and then jump back down at the end. It scares me in a way nothing has ever scared me before, and every time I accidentally think about it, it freaks me out. So there you go. What do you think? Think it's an intruder, someone just fucking around?
Could have been a skinwalker, man.
I think I would have been sold on the skinwalker thing if it was like, let me in.
Is that what skinwalkers do,
Let
Britain?
me in.
Definitely.
Mimicking her child.
Definitely a skinwalker.
Yeah, that would have sold the skinwalker thing for me for sure.
All right, this next story is coming from Hot Dogger 2020. Britain, wasn't that your nickname in high school?
I was literally just going to say that to you. Like, hey, you haven't heard that nickname since high school, have you?
It's
you
titled.
Fucker, get out of my head.
It's titled Creepy Hunting Encounter. I once held a hunting lease in the middle of Georgia. It was an abandoned hunting camp that hadn't been used in several years. I'm not superstitious at all, but this place was legitimately spooky. It was miles down an overgrown dirt road and completely surrounded by woods. It's probably the most secluded place I've ever been. I used to hunt there by myself a lot, and there was always this weird sense of foreboding that I wasn't alone out there. There was a locked gate at the front of the property, but it was not uncommon for us to find the front door of the cabin open, even when the door was locked. That was pretty creepy, but that's not what this story's about. Ooh, that's good exposition.
Oh, damn.
One evening, I was hunting down in a small valley by a food plot we put lining a creek that bordered the property. From the minute I sat down, I had a weird feeling, like I wasn't in a safe place, even though I was holding a .308 with ballistic-tipped rounds. I didn't feel like I was the top predator out there. I didn't see any deer while I was sitting at the stand, but the forest was buzzing with activity. Birds, squirrels, and other critters singing their normal evening symphony, and then all of a sudden, silence. Everything just stopped. It felt like everything in the woods were looking right at me. Nope. It was getting... Yeah, that's scary, dude. That's creepy as hell. It was getting dark fast anyways, and I was extremely creeped out, so I packed up my gear and started to walk back up to the cabin. About 100 yards away, I had this feeling that something was coming up behind me. I spun around and pointed my rifle back down the path towards the food plot, and that's when I saw it. There was something standing in the middle of the path. It wasn't a person, but it didn't look like a deer or anything I've seen before. There was hardly any light to make out any features, but it almost looked like some kind of bipedal deer or something. It was just standing there, staring at me. I quickly made my way back to the cabin, packed up my stuff, and got out of there. I just let the lease run out, never went back after that. Now that, my friends, sounds like a skinwalker. Like straight fucking skinwalker right there.
Let me in.
That's not what they say, man. I don't know what type of skinwalker you've been seeing, Britton, but I don't know what's going on.
I only see weird skinwalkers that just want to come inside.
Let me in.
All right, this title is very accusatory. It's titled She Poisoned Me, and it comes from Powder Fresh 86. My parents got married while still in high school. I wouldn't recommend this, the 12th grade to be exact. They were legal adults. I came just a year later when my mom was 19 and my dad was 20. We lived in a one-bedroom upstairs apartment in a crappy complex. I slept in my crib until I started climbing out of it and finding my way into my parents' bed, or into trouble. When I was 4, my parents decided that I needed my own room, so they upgraded to a 2-bedroom downstairs apartment in the exact same complex. They fought horribly all the time, but outside of that, everything was pretty normal. I made a few friends with other children around the complex, and a cousin and her 3 kids also lived in the complex. They also wrote, I wrote about my evil cousin here with another story, but I don't know. Maybe we'll come back to it. Everything was fine until a new neighbor moved in next door when I was 6. Immediately, this lady did not like me, and she didn't hide it either. I was at school when she moved in, but on the weekends when I went out to ride my big wheel bike and play, she stood in her door and glared at me with the most hateful look a person could ever give a child. Man, she hates kids.
I really hate kids, man. If society would let me, I'd hit them.
Probably. To be honest, I didn't like her either. Something about her bothered my spirit greatly, though at the time I didn't understand why. It's like she could sense my presence outside and would literally spawn outdoors just to glare daggers at me and mutter things under her breath. I felt an evil presence on her and started making a cross with my fingers whenever I saw her. He's like, Demon lady!
Demon lady!
The power of Christ compels you, witch!
You hag!
That's insane. This enraged her, and she lied and told my mom that I threw her a middle finger. My mom believed me instead. Yeah. Strange things started happening in my room at night. I had a rocking horse. It was beautiful, and I enjoyed playing on top of it. Well, it was beautiful, and I enjoyed playing on it. I don't know why I threw on top of it.
I just love riding that horse.
I don't know. My brain just went a completely different way. I just love spanking the back of it and spurring it on. Yeehaw! However, it started rocking on its own whenever that I tried to sleep. My parents had heard this as the springs made a very distinctive noise. I had one of those dolls that eyes would open and close depending on if it's lying down or sitting up. The doll's eyes would sometimes remain open while lying down, or it would blink, scaring the crap out of me. There would be strange knocking noises on my wall. My parents heard this as well, and they permitted me to sleep with them in bed. One day, my mom and I got locked out of our apartment. This was before everyone had cell phones, in the 90s, and our cousin wasn't home. My mom, against my pleas, knocked on the neighbor's door to use her phone. She let us in, glaring at me the entire time. I never let go of Mom's hand or came from behind her leg. He flipped her off again. He's like, thanks for letting us use your phone, bitch. In her house, on her wall, were multiple upside down crosses. Oh, damn.
But she is a demon, bitch.
Strange looking masks, some with horns. There were candles everywhere and small, colorful bottles with powder inside of them. My mom looked around like, what the fuck? But kept her composure. She held my hand tighter, made the phone call to my dad at his job to hurry back home, and we quickly exited the apartment after thanking the woman. She watched me close as we left. My mom told my dad everything, and he told his father, my grandfather, who was a pastor. He immediately brought us a bottle of prayed over olive oil, holy oil, to anoint our house. My mom also told her side of the family, who were very strict Christians, and they were, for a lack of a better word, flabbergasted, and started a prayer meeting. A few days later, we noticed at our back door a white powder substance across the threshold. My mom poured some of the oil on it, and it absorbed it, and it disappeared. The woman later tried to offer me some candy, which I declined, though I loved sweets. My nickname was Sugar Ant because I loved junk so much. I had made friends with a little girl in the complex that lived on the other side, and one day she had some soft chews and offered me one. Like an idiot, I accepted it, and I ate it. It didn't take long before I fell violently ill. Fever,
my God.
sweating, skin darkened, dark circles around my eyes. Nothing given to me at the doctor's helped. I couldn't keep anything down. On intuition, my mom asked, did I accept and eat anything from anyone, and I confessed to accepting candy from a friend. She asked around and found out the girl was the granddaughter of our next-door neighbor. Damn. My dad called over my grandfather and my mom and her family. They anointed me with holy oil and made a prayer circle around me, started speaking in tongues. I was in and out of consciousness. My grandfather lifted me up and made me drink some of the oil. I remember it burned my throat. Suddenly, I had to throw up. I leapt from the couch where I was lying and I sprinted to the bathroom, where I started throwing up a thick, black sludge. A lot of it came out. My mom was shaking and on the verge of tears. Everyone continued praying in tongues. I threw up for a while until it was all out. I suddenly felt a lot better. I was fussed at for accepting food from strangers, even friends. The adults talked while I rested. After a few days, the woman saw that I was fine. This time I glared back at her and I was angry. I was young, but I understood that she had tried to poison me for no reason at all. I made the cross sign again with my fingers and she went back in her house and slammed her door. It wasn't long until she moved out after that. Damn, that's insane, man.
Freaking devil woman.
Trying to poison a child with some candy.
Have some of my caramel. So goddamn good, it'll make you sick. All right, this one is from Sass Green Eyes. It's called Mary. A grocery store overnights. I worked as an overnight grocery stocker manager for 19 years. This happened about 15 years ago. We were working on one of the nights where we didn't have a load, just doing back stock. Once a week, one of our meat department employees would stay late and do deep cleaning. It was Mary's turn this week. It was a bit after midnight when Mary came up to me in tears, all shook up. She was telling me that there was a man all dressed in black standing in the meat department, motioning for her to go to him. I grabbed another one of my employees to go look for this guy. We looked everywhere, but I didn't see anyone. I reassured Mary we looked everywhere, but didn't see anyone else in the store. But I still felt a bit uneasy about the whole thing. Our closing manager always does a walkthrough to make sure no one is left in the store. Mary went back to work, but just a few minutes later came back to me in a panic mode, telling me that he was back and motioning for her to come to him. Once again, we went looking around and didn't see anyone there. I told Mary she could go home and not to worry about finishing her work. That morning, when the store manager came in, I was telling her what had happened. She pulled up the camera footage and saw nothing weird. She told me that Mary told her a strange story a few nights before about a customer with a knife. We just thought maybe it was just Mary having too much stress. The next night, I went into work and was told Mary had passed away that morning. Oh, damn.
That's insane.
She went home from work, went to bed, and never woke up. It still runs through my head to this day. The weirdest thing that ever happened on my overnight shift. Damn, dude, that's fucking weird.
All right, this one's called Psycho Granny. I wonder if she's going to try and poison anyone with candy. It comes from Bears Live in the Woods. No shit. All right. I was maybe 8, which would make my sister 12. My brother wasn't born yet, and I'm 9 years older than him, so had to be before then. Our parents were out for their anniversary dinner, which meant that they'd be out until probably midnight. My sister was very responsible and capable in babysitting me. I didn't find out until years later, but apparently my parents warned my sister that our grandma, my dad's mom, was manic depressive, which is old-timey talk for bipolar. They told her that she was mad at my dad for holding some boundary with her and not to let her in or even respond to her if she came by the house. Listen, if you see your grandma, don't let her in the house. Just ignore her. She's psycho.
Psycho Granny.
Of course, none of this was communicated to me. How could you tell an 8-year-old something like that? Anyway, a couple hours into the evening, we hear a knock on the door. My sister immediately shushes me and holds her fingers over her lips. Robbie, I know you're in there, Robbie. Come open the door. I remember it like it was yesterday. I could tell it was my grandma, but I could also tell that something wasn't right. My sister moves us to the hallway where we sit quietly out of sight of any windows. Grandma keeps pounding on the door, demanding my dad let her in. Then it goes quiet for a while. I start to relax a bit. Of course, that doesn't last. Suddenly, a bedroom window starts getting slammed, and my grandma sounds like a fucking demon screaming for my dad. I've never heard such anger since. She moves across the entire house, pounding on every single window. If she wasn't so old, she would surely have broken a window with the absolute fury she was exuding. Then it goes quiet again. But now I know better than to relax. We're just huddled together in the hallway in complete silence. I'm shaking like a leaf, and so is my sister. This grandma had played games with my sister to hurt my parents in the past, such as taking her to the mall and going to register with some jewelry, and then saying never mind, or buying the same jewelry for our cousin. Seriously twisted shit. So it's been quiet for a while, and out of nowhere we hear Grandma putting on this sweet, sweet voice and directly addressing us and trying to coax us with candy to open the door. What's up with all this fucking candy?
I'm gonna give you a nice caramel.
You know what she said, Cleet? Let me in.
I knew it. It's a goddamn Wendigo.
It's
Skinwalker.
a Wendigo.
I don't know what it is.
You know what all these stories have in common? They're all fucking Wendigos.
I believe it.
She always had a shit ton of candy around, since she was also a diabetic in serious denial. This was the most surreal experience, as she just sounded like Satan himself. And now she sounded like a sweet old granny again. She almost got me. Thankfully, my sister was wise beyond her years and held me close. Finally, it's quiet for about an hour, and my sister says it's time for bed. My bedroom faced the backyard, which had a pool and a high wall, beyond which was a vast empty field with an old railroad track through it. I was used to hearing coyotes, foxes, and other animals outside. Right as I'm winding down to fall asleep, the absolute loudest scratching on my window starts as if fucking Freddy Krueger himself was trying to haunt my dreams.
At least say there was a pun.
Let me in, bitch. I could see the silhouette of my grandma in the moonlight as if it was a full moon that night. No other windows got scratched that night, just mine. Then it was over. I woke up the next day and my sister was telling our parents all about it. I couldn't even be in the room while it was being discussed. A few weeks later, she died from an E. coli infection. Oh, I bet you feel bad now not letting her in.
Yeah.
She died like She died like Elvis on the toilet. At her viewing, they put on one of her classic flowy blouses, and there was a breeze that lifted it up a bit, causing one of my cousins to shout, "She's alive!" and run away. After the funeral, I told my mom and dad that I was glad she was gone, and according to my mom, I said, "Grandma really stressed me out." I'm really glad Grandma's dead, Mom. She later told me that no child of my age at the time should have to say their grandma stressed them out. All right, so that's it. That's pretty wild, man. I don't know. What would you do? Being a young 9-year-old and your grandma's like, Cleet, I've got some candy. Please let me in. I just want to hug you.
I'm scary Terry, bitch.
Let me in, bitch.
I'd lock the door, man. That's weird shit.
Did you ever watch The Visit from M. Night Shyamalan? I know you love Shyamalan, but The Visit that he did?
I don't think so. I stopped after The Village.
So The Visit's actually really good. It's about these kids that go to stay with their grandparents for the weekend. You should watch it. It's genuinely pretty good.
I recall the previews, and I'm pretty sure they realize that's not their grandparents or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's the plot.
So yeah, then don't watch it if you know.
Yeah, I don't.
It was actually pretty good. I enjoyed it.
All right, this one is called Old Year 6268. Never hunt alone. This happened back in the fall of 2016. I live in a very small and rural community where everyone knows everyone. The state that I live in allows rifle mule deer buck hunting during the first week of October. Sustenance hunting is very important in the culture of my area. This fall, I was lucky enough to have drawn a buck tag. I had made plans to hunt on my grandmother's farm on this evening. Given that I'm a smaller woman, I had to ask my husband to go with me in case I killed something. He could help me pack it out. However, he could not go due to work obligations. Fine, no problem. I've hunted this farm many times by myself. I know it like the back of my hand. I strapped on my boots, grabbed my rifle and binoculars, tucked my cell phone into my pocket, and made my way to my Jeep. My grandmother's farm consists of corn bordering an alfalfa field along a river. Between the river and the farm are lines of old-growth trees. This is the perfect place to fill a buck tag. I parked my Jeep about a mile up from the river from the fields, then began walking along the tree line towards the area where the deer had mostly been feeding. At the opposite end of the field, there's a large haystack where all the harvested alfalfa is stored. As I saw it coming into the field of my view, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I kneeled down and viewed the area through my binoculars. I could see a very tall, large man walking briskly towards me from behind the haystack. I knew for a fact that I was supposed to be the only one hunting on this farm on this night, as I had just spoken to my grandmother. Something inside me told me I needed to get out of the area as fast as I could. I initially tried to turn around and walk back down the streets to my Jeep, but given that I have such short legs, this guy was quickly closing the gap, quickly. He was still several hundred yards from me, so I decided to try to cross the river instead. I found that the river was too muddy and deep for me to safely cross. I thought my only option was to attempt to get a signal on my cell phone. When he walked across a small ditch and disparaged from my line of sight, I quickly darted into the corn and kept quiet. I could hear him walking closer and closer. I desperately tried to call my husband. Back then, the closest cell towers were 30 miles away, and cell service was extremely spotty. I could not connect my husband or 911. By this point, the man was within 100 yards of me. I could hear him ripping corn out, stomping around and loudly cussing. "Where the fuck did you go?" Another issue is it was getting dark quickly. I definitely did not want to be in the dark alone with this man. I watched him for a few minutes and was able to determine that he did not have a gun. After weighing my options, I decided to step out and see if I could de-escalate the situation, as I work in healthcare and work with mentally unstable people all the time. I stepped out of the corn. "Hi, I'm sorry if I interrupted your hunt or something. I did not cause any harm," I said with a sweet smile on my face. I made sure there was at least 80 yards of distance between us. His eyes locked with mine, and it was obvious that there was something with this man. He stood about 6'5" tall. His clothes were absolutely filthy, stained with what appeared to be his own waste and sweat. His shirt was torn and had dried blood on it. His face was crooked, as if he had a stroke prior, and he slurred his words. "There you fucking are," he yelled. He reached down and grabbed a massive stick. I'm talking a stick at least 5 feet long. He could have easily have killed me with this stick. I stood my ground and grabbed my rifle from the back and pointed it at him. He stopped holding the stick. We looked at each other for a second, and he began yelling. "Do you know whose farm you're on?" I stated, "Yes, this is my grandmother's farm. I've hunted here my whole life." The veins began to pop out of his head. "No, this is not. My wife is hunting in the cornfield, and you ruined it. Because of you, she missed a huge buck, you stupid bitch."
Oh, damn.
He became so enraged he started making strange growling noises and started spitting everywhere. I was running through the options in my head at this point when he suddenly started to lunge at me. I turned the safety off on my rifle and loudly stated, "Stop! I will shoot you if I have to." He froze in his tracks and just stared at me for 30 seconds before dropping the stick. He grunted loudly with his eyes darting around. "Listen, I don't want to have to do something we will both regret, and I'm very sorry I ruined your hunt. If you turn around and walk away from me, I will leave," I calmly explained. I could see his thinking hard about what to do next when he mumbled, "Fine," and turned around, stomping back towards the haystack. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. I was not about to turn my back on this man, though. I watched until he walked a distance away and then darted back into the corn. I thought back on how he said I spooked a massive buck and ruined his wife's hunt. But that didn't make any sense. I had a good view of the whole field, and there was no deer present. I decided to observe him through my binoculars. I watched him climb up the haystack and get into a small 2-door white car. He quickly peeled out of the haystack lot. I was able to catch that the car had California license plates, but nothing more. I live nowhere near California. He took off down the road, and he was alone. No one else was in that vehicle. I ran back to my Jeep and locked myself in it. I sped home as fast as I could. I told my husband what happened, and had never seen this man in my life, and neither had my husband, based on my description. We lived in a community of about 200 people. Born and raised here, we know everyone. I called our local sheriff, and they came out and took a statement. I took them to the haystack where he was parked, and we found a knife lying on the ground. Of course, nothing could be done, as I was not able to get the plate number or the name of the man. To this day, I have no idea what the man's intentions were, even though I could have guessed on a few. It's been 8 years, and I have never seen this man again. I have decided that I will be hunting with a buddy from then on. Creepy story, man.
Never go hunting alone, though. This is a short one. It's called Scariest Person I Have Ever Briefly Met. It's from Sir John01. One night, a neighbor I had never talked to asked me to help him break into his own house. I told him it's 1 a.m. and you're being weird. He asked me if I could...
If I had
it's
$1,
1 a.m., dude, you're being fucking weird.
If I had $1 every time someone said that to me,
you'd be a millionaire. He asked me if I could borrow a wrench or a hammer, and if I don't trust him that I could use them instead. I told him, let's be reasonable. It's 1 a.m. Stop acting strange. So he left. 2 days later, police surrounded his house. He had murdered his father. I reported the event to the police. The murder occurred around the reported time. They were unable to figure out if he wanted to use me as an alibi. We break in, and his father's already dead. Or if he had a fight with his dad, broke in, and then murdered him. 15 years later, today, I saw workers cleaning the house, which reminded me of this whole story. Over the years, the house was completely covered in vegetation. I wonder who owns the house now. It'd be weird if he did. Should there be a law if you murder your dad that you can't inherit his property? That's wild, man. What would you do? Like, someone comes up and is like, hey, help me break into my house, and you find out there's been a murder?
Yeah, that's why I don't help people break into houses.
That's why I don't help people, period.
Just in general. Hey, man, can you help me move? Like, no. No, you probably murdered someone.
No. How do I know you're not going to go in and murder someone? How do I know? I don't. You're on your own, buddy. Can I borrow your car?
Funny.
No. How do I know you're not going to run someone over with it?
Fucking
Go to
murderer.
Yeah, that's my first thought is every time someone asks me for help, I'm like, you're a murderer, aren't you? You're a fucking serial killer. Don't talk to me. All right, folks, that's going to wrap us up for the evening. Thank you all for joining us for some true creepy stories. And I think we all learned that a couple things. If you see an old lady handing out candy, definitely don't do it.
She's probably a hag.
If someone asks you for help, don't help them.
Probably a murderer.
And hunting, probably not a good idea at all.
Yeah, watch out for the deer.
Yeah, exactly. The deer are bad. As always, thank you to the paid supporters of our show, Soylent Cleat, Modelo Time, Cleat Feet, Curtis and Laura, Mothman, Devin, Laura, Conklin family, and Lou. Your paid support of the show is tremendously helpful, and if you yourself would like to become a paid supporter of the show, click the link below. There's a couple tiers to choose from, and you'll get a shout out at the end of every single episode. All the help is supportive. And there's also a link to do one-time donations if you want to contribute to the beer fund or any other shenanigans we like to do.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe as it really helps us get us out there. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.